As far as some traveling tips for visiting Japan, first and foremost, you want to be familiar with the customs and culture of the country. There are many different things that you could do that are common for someone from the United States that are considered offensive or derogatory, so on and so forth, for those in Japan. For example, you should take off your outdoor shoes when entering a home. And for another example, a pretty neat little idea here, tipping is viewed as impolite or wrong. A lot of times, if you leave a tip at a restaurant in Japan, you might find your waiter or waitress chasing after you with the change, thinking that you left money on the table. Whereas here in the United States, obviously, this is not something that is is looked at as taboo. People generally tip when they are out at restaurants being served by servers, and the idea of indoor versus outdoor shoes doesn't necessarily exist here in the United States. Um, so things like this, being familiar with the culture and customs, like I said before, politeness is very, very important. Politeness is key. For example, trying not to answer phones in public places and doing other similar things. In addition to these two things, you want to try to take advantage of different specific areas and times of the year. For example, there's cherry blossom season. There's different specific releases in musics, animes, and mangas that are looked at as, holidays in the country of Japan. And also, you want to try to go to areas like Mount Fuji, other famous regions like Tokyo, where you can have a higher level of tourist events and ideas and things to take part in. Of course, also you'd like to bring extra cash to exchange, bring a large amount of cash. And of course, you want to be wary of the costs and exchanges of the country of Japan. Flights and travel are generally very expensive, and you want to be familiar with what you're going to be getting into before you get over there. As far as some different current issues in Japan, Japan is still recovering from different issues related to the global pandemic, much like many other countries are at the current time. These are huge economic issues that have been made present by this global pandemic. A $1 trillion stimulus package was implemented in the spring of 2021, and this has helped a great deal, but many issues are still in place. Many of these issues rely on the idea of the supply chain crash, and these supply chain issues have caused much friction in several markets within the internal and external Japanese market. This is directly related to rising food and energy prices, and as previously stated, Japan is the largest importer of globally of many, many different energy-related goods. These rising energy prices have made it difficult for the people in Japan to live and live in a fiscally responsible environment. And in addition to all of this, the Japanese yen has dropped dramatically. As it currently stands as of this moment, $1 is equivalent to 149 Japanese yen, meaning that as far as global multinational firms in the Japanese market, there are 45 total companies within the Fortune Global 500 that exist headquartered in Japan. A large number of them are automotive companies that people are familiar with. Toyota, Mitsubishi, Honda, Nissan, all located in the country of Japan. There are other major entities that are mostly conglomerates, such as Mitsui, Hitachi, and Sony. And of course, the large majority of these companies are headquartered in Tokyo, the capital. As far as popular culture in Japan, things like sports, shows, movies, and music, and more dominate the market very heavily. Athletics and sports are not as prominent but are still very popular. The top ranked sport in the country of Japan is baseball, and other popular sports are sumo wrestling, soccer, tennis, golf, basketball, so on and so forth. Niche cuisine is viewed as popular worldwide. Many dishes have received a lot of global recognition, such as sushi and ramen. These dishes have paved their way into restaurants everywhere. You can go basically everywhere in the United States and globally, quite frankly, to find a dish, sushi and ramen, both popularized within the Japanese culture. Also, art is very popular, hosting a rather historic art scene. There's a huge influence on the many design aspects that occur in Japan to this day. It's at the forefront of the design and art market of the planet Earth, and art has been very, very important in Japan for centuries now. In addition to all of this, there are various forms of media that are very, very popular in Japan. So, movies, shows, anime, manga, and music. popular manga and anime is a global statement now. Shows like One Piece, Naruto, Dragon Ball, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, and more dominate the markets. These shows are drafted by different authors as manga, which is understood to be comics. They are then translated into English and sold in the United States, and they're also popularized in cartoons that are referred to as anime, and also subsequently made into video games in some circumstances. There are many, many differences in cultural and business practices. When conducting business deals, one has to understand the differences in cultural and business practices. As mentioned in Hofstede's Insights, there are a number of differences in the practices of the Japanese people versus United States. First and foremost that I'd like to note is the long-term orientation. Those from Japan see their life as quote-unquote short in the grand scheme of things. These ideas are constantly being created for future generations. This gears directly into the idea of business. People are trying to do more and more things for the future, whereas Americans are obsessed with the now, never thinking too much about the future. In addition to this, there's uncertainty avoidance, where Japan scores incredibly high in this category, partly as a result of, as I said before, the high prevalence of natural disasters. No day is certain. They adopt a is what it is type of mentality, and Americans are more concerned with the uncertain, how they can improve their lives, and they get caught up in this in a number of different ways. Also, aside from those cultural differences, many straightforward business practices differ as well. When looking to conduct business in Japan, business is conducted slower, stretching at all levels of the organization for decision making. So, for example, if someone at point A wants to make a decision, before he does so, they must review with their superiors. Those superiors must review with their superiors all the way up to the top of the chain, and then that decision will be relayed back down to the point in which it started. That's very, very important to know because, as stated before, this idea of Japan as a group think sort of location in their business practice is very, very prominent. They rely on each other from top to the bottom and horizontally as well. Businesses and workplaces are much, much more formal. And group motivation, as I said, is very prominent as opposed to the individualistic thinking of the United States and other countries. There's a high idea, even in accordance with this, of social gatherings after work or projects. So you go to Japan, if you want to come to a deal in a business sense, you may go and go out for a drink afterwards, which is somewhat common in the United States, but it's more regularly recognized and understood as something that's kind of demanded in the country of Japan. However, although these differences do exist, there are many practices and ideas that still remain the same. Working is working is obviously compensated. Those who are hard workers will surely be rewarded for their time and effort. Long hours, there's not much time off for vacations. Success is greatly valued. Scaling works similarly. You work to move upward within the idea of a company, and of course, as always, loyalty is rewarded. All right, that is the end. I hope you guys all enjoyed my presentation about the country of Japan, and that you were all able to take a lot of this into consideration. If you're ever going to be dealing with something in the country of Japan in the future, I hope that you guys all were able to learn a little bit about business practices, the country at a glance, the different ideas within it, and things that make Japan Japan. Thank you, and God bless.